This podcast is sponsored by the Fargo-Moorhead West Fargo Chamber of Commerce. The Chamber is a catalyst for growth and prosperity and is here to protect and promote business, inspire innovation, cultivate communities, and influence action. Learn more at fmwfchamber.com.
Hello there, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the InForum Business Beat Podcast. This is your host, Thomas Evanella. We're changing things up a bit on this week's episode. We wanted to dive back into a story we brought you a few weeks back about applied blockchain. Now, if you missed my story and the corresponding podcast episode, no worries at all. You'll be up to speed by the end of this episode. Applied Blockchain is a high-performance computing company from Dallas, Texas that has made headlines by building facilities here in North Dakota. The first was opened in Jamestown, and now a second $100 million facility is under construction in the small rural town of Ellendale. This is a story we've been getting quite a bit of feedback on. Why is a company from Texas making such a large investment in North Dakota? Where will they be getting all of their computing power? What does Applied Blockchain even do? To answer those questions and more, I sat down with Applied Blockchain's Executive Vice President of Hosting and Public Affairs, Nick Phillips. Like I said, we're going to be focusing on Applied Blockchain on this episode, but if you are looking for the latest business news, be sure to visit inforum.com/business. With all that said, let's hear from Nick. Nick, thanks for taking some time to be here today.
Yeah, thanks a lot for having me, Thomas.
Yeah, absolutely. And so just to get started, tell us a little bit about yourself. Tell us about Applied Blockchain and what your company does.
Sure, absolutely. So I'm Nick Phillips. As you mentioned, I'm the EVP of Hosting Operations and also Public Affairs. So I get to work with local communities, utilities, state and federal government to kind of pull these projects together from the ground up. I've got a pretty technical background. I've been programming since I was about 10. I've owned and operated a lot of different businesses in lots of different sectors, print shop, IT, programming, and ISP, data center. Various things like that. And back in 2017, I got into building these types of facilities for really the first very large facilities in North America for blockchain and cryptocurrency. But, you know, Applied Digital, we're blockchain, which is a high power compute, application. It's one of them. And we'll have some other types of facilities coming up here for artificial intelligence, machine learning, neural networks, gene sequencing, things like that.
And you've been up and running here in Jamestown, North Dakota for how long now?
So we broke ground in Jamestown, North Dakota, September 14th of last year. We started turning on the first of our equipment January 30th of this year, so just a few months. We had a pretty rough winter of construction. Probably one of the worst winters in at least a few years, it sounds like. But yeah, so we've been operating a bit since January 30th, and we were at 100 megawatts, which is the full site size of the site in Jamestown by mid-year.
And how have things been going out in Jamestown then, since you've kind of gotten to that full capacity?
Good. Yeah, we've really enjoyed our time in North Dakota. Everybody we hired at the facility there, except for, I believe, 2, came from living already within about 20 minutes of the site. So not a big transition for our folks who work in North Dakota. And we've really gotten to know the state and the area and work with people. And it just blows my mind every time I go up there, especially during the winter, how hard people are working and what they're willing to do to get jobs done for us. And it's really been a very positive experience, and the community, Jamestown, has really, brought a lot of things together with us. We did some work with the University of Jamestown. We got involved with some sports events and our breast cancer run and other things. So it's been very engaged community and very interested in participating with what we're doing.
So what does sort of a day inside the Jamestown facility look like then?
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess before I get into that, it would be beneficial for your listeners to understand what's the facility kind of look like. People hear like data center or blockchain or high power compute, and they don't know what that means. So you can really just think of our buildings as they're long, skinny buildings. They're steel prefabricated buildings. They kind of look like a turkey barn. So they're just long, skinny buildings. The long sides on both sides are just open. We have ways of closing them either with dampers or these roll up wind screens, depending on the side of the building. And we just pull ambient air right through the building. So that all said, we have 8 data center buildings in Jamestown. We have an office. We've got a workshop and some storage, fire pump house. So, we've got, call it 70,000 or so square feet of building space on the site. So as with any steel buildings, there's maintenance, right? Screws get loose over time, things like that. There's weed control that we need to do. There's keeping the site, neat and tidy. During the winter with snow, there's snow drifts. Like we're dealing with snow drifts, and we're dealing with dust and all that kind of stuff during the rest of the year when it's not wet. So just, normal things you would see in any facility in the state of North Dakota is part of it. And then outside of that, the technical aspects that we have are not that complicated. We have a whole in-house training program. So we train everybody, how to operate the machines, how to maintain them and change them. So, there's tens of thousands of these little devices, these little computers basically are running on the site, and we have software that monitors what they're doing. And sometimes it goes wrong, right? They stop working, a fan breaks, a part breaks, whatever happens. So we'll then send our operators out into the site, go find the one that broke, either fix it right there. Sometimes fixing it's just turning it on and off again, just like your computer. If have a problem with your computer, sometimes it's that simple, and other times it's taking some screws out, putting a new fan on, replacing a board, reinstalling software on it, something like that. It's really a lot of maintenance. It's just there's just a lot of things going on at the same time. It's not that complicated. It's just you have to stay on top of it.
So are there like rows and rows of like servers and computers and things like that? Because I'm guessing that's what a lot of people have in mind when they think of something like this. Is that what it really looks like inside?
Yeah. So on the inside, so I described those long, skinny buildings, right? So there's actually just one row in each of the buildings, but that row is 20 foot tall, right? So it's just a wall of these little computer like devices. The miners themselves are just like these little, devices with fans on them and processors inside of them. They're called ASICs. But so yeah, it's just a long wall of these devices, 20 feet tall by 300 feet long, sort of a thing. Lots of blinking lights, lots of fans, spinning all the time.
So obviously things are going fairly well for you out in Jamestown, here in North Dakota in general. Otherwise you wouldn't be expanding. You're expanding into Ellendale. Tell us about the move into Ellendale and why you decided it was the right fit.
Yeah, so Ellendale will be almost twice as large as Jamestown. And Ellendale is, it's a little more rural. It's a smaller town. There is also a college there. But the main thing that we look for is these imbalances in the power grid. The biggest thing that we need to find is electricity, right? The capacity to serve our energy needs. And that's not just sitting around everywhere. Like I can't just say, hey, I want to go build a facility in Minot, or hey, I'm just going to go build a facility in Williston or Fargo or somewhere. You have to do all this work to figure out where there's opportunity. And, to us, the opportunity is where there's imbalances in the electrical system. And what do I mean by that? So in the case of the area surrounding Ellendale, there's a lot of wind farms generating a lot of electricity. But there's not enough transmission lines to export that electricity, that energy from that area to other areas. And so what ends up happening is some company will come in and build, say, 100 megawatt wind farm or gigawatt wind farm or something. That's not specific to the area, but they'll build something, and the wind will blow, And if there's too much energy being produced, then what they do is they curtail those facilities. So they actually stop generating electricity. And when they stop generating electricity, there's revenue that's not going to the local communities or the state from that. There's, of course, revenue not going to the companies who have built these facilities from that. So in the case of Ellendale, there's what's called congestion, where there's more energy being produced than there's the ability to export out of that area. And so by us building this facility in Ellendale, we will reduce the congestion in the area, which means that these wind farms can perform better. They'll be able to generate electricity, more often, and it'll have a positive, revenue impact also to the local communities.
So the facility itself in Ellendale, that's going to be bigger than Jamestown. Is it going to be doing pretty similar computing tasks then?
It's almost twice the size of Jamestown in terms of compute overall, and it will be very similar to Jamestown in all ways. Yeah, the buildings are very similar. There's a few, adjustments we found as we've now been in North Dakota for a little bit over a year. We've learned a little bit more about the environment and how it's going to work. So we've adjusted things, but yes, the site's almost exactly the same.
Saying you've learned a little bit more about the environment, is that kind of your nice way of saying that it's really cold here?
When I showed up in January, February of this past winter, and it's -30 and there's 50-mile-an-hour winds, I was literally blown away. Sliding down the ice, but also I was just blown away by the workers who were out there, every day, just really working hard and getting stuff done despite that. I did see our general contractor walking around in a sweater vest and tennis shoes when it was way too cold out. So pretty tough bunch up in North Dakota, living there. So yes, that's part of it, but there's also some of the storms that come through, lightning and thunder and hail just kind of blows right through suddenly, and you kind of have to deal with that. So it is a different environment. I live down in the south, and it's certainly much more warm, and I'm not used to those environments. But I did figure out that after being there when it's -20 and I come home and it's only 30 Fahrenheit, I could walk around outside with just a t-shirt on and be totally comfortable. So I've definitely the last year has been a pretty good initiation into North Dakota.
Yeah, you are hardier for it now, aren't you?
Yep. But our people who are up there, they've grown up in North Dakota. Many of them, they've been there for many generations, and so they're used to it. And that's what we like. We like to get into communities and work with the folks who are already there and really build a long-term, lasting relationship.
So you just transitioned into my next question perfectly, actually. So you mentioned the staffing in Jamestown. What are you expecting employment-wise down in Ellendale?
So Ellendale will be approximately 30, plus or minus a few. It kind of depends on who we find and what we need there, but right around 30 people.
Okay. And I think this is the question that's sort of swirling around up here the most is how does a high-tech company from Texas decide it wants to start doing business in North Dakota anyway? Take us back to when this all started.
Yeah, absolutely. So our EVP of power was looking for locations for quite some time, ended up connecting with the power company in North Dakota for Jamestown and chatted with them and had some back and forth. And it was, for him, that was before he was even working for us. It was a long time period to try to figure out, hey, North Dakota is a net exporter of energy. And when energy leaves the state, there's not sales tax revenue that goes along with that to the state. And so for North Dakota would much rather see the energy generated in the state be used in state. It means more jobs. It means the sales tax revenue. It means all sorts of things to the communities. So he spent some time chatting with them. I mentioned before that I've been building facilities like this since 2017, or it's when I started anyway. And we look to find places where we can operate with ambient air temperatures and not have to run air conditioning or other types of cooling like swamp coolers and use a lot of water, things like that. And of course, North Dakota is much cooler than Texas. So the percentage of the year that we can run with no cooling is very, very high. It's almost the entire year. There's just some peak days in the summer where, it can get into the upper 90s or maybe even low hundreds. So North Dakota from a weather standpoint is great. From a regulatory standpoint, it's been really fantastic to work with all the folks we've met in North Dakota. Mostly the attitude is, how can we do more business? How can we attract more people into the state? There's certainly some states that's not their position. So that's been great for North Dakota. I mentioned the capacity for electricity is, that's first and foremost, right? So there was capacity in Jamestown for us. And then you just add all these other things on, and it starts to make, a lot of sense. We just had such a great experience in North Dakota that we thought we'd like to do it again.
So North Dakota is such an agricultural state, but what you're saying is maybe, the weather means that North Dakota could become a high-tech state.
There's a lot of great benefits for technology in North Dakota. Absolutely. And
then one last thing for you, Nick. What do you foresee as the future for your company, be it here in North Dakota or elsewhere?
Yeah, so these facilities are, long life type of facilities. We expect them to last 20, 30 plus years. The facilities themselves, we're an infrastructure company. So whatever the technology is in the building, it matters to us because we have to help manage it and take care of it and keep it running and operating. But whatever the technology is, however it changes, we'll continue to, move along with that as things progress. But the facilities themselves, we expect to last for decades. So we'll continue to, maintain and operate those, and hopefully we'll be able to expand some more in North Dakota. As a company, we're continuing to expand also in other states. We've got another facility under construction now. We've got other locations in states we're doing due diligence in to try to find more places to build facilities. Of course, we want some geographic diversity. But yeah, it's definitely a long-term thing where we're looking to just get these things up and running and work with the folks who are going to operate them. You mentioned it's an agricultural state, right? So there's not a ton of folks who have, very high level, technical experience. There's some, definitely. But that's not, Jamestown, North Dakota hasn't been historically a tech center, right? So we've come up with training programs. And I think that as we, train more and more folks, it can attract other people, to the area. You kind of build this community. Where I live, we have a very technical, community in the downtown area. And it's really kind of over the last 20 years, just kind of burgeoned and grown into something pretty special. And I think something like that could happen there as well.
And once again, that was Nick Phillips, Executive Vice President of Hosting Operations and Public Affairs for Applied Blockchain. Nick, thanks again so much for sharing the story with us.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.
When you can't make it to City Hall or school board meetings, local journalists from InForum.com will be there to report the facts and get your questions answered. Local news works for you. Stay up to date at InForum.com.